So for this Sandbox episode, or I guess mini segment, what we're going to do is now talk to the hosts. So we're going to just, I mean, for me, what I wanted was to get a kind of a peek behind the curtain to see what goes on in the sausage factory that is this episode. No, we're going to that.
Yeah. No. I like this visual. Keep going.
That really is.
Can you describe this sausage?
On a scale of 1 to sausage, how much sausage are we talking about here?
Back to new skin.
I don't even know. Do I want to know what new skin is?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Okay.
All right, maybe we should start over.
I'm going to do that again. I'm keeping it in with the history of Andrews. So for this mini Sandbox episode of the 100th episode of the M of One podcast, we're again flipping it around, and Jerrod and I are going to quickly interview the classic hosts of the show. So I think I'm just going to start things off if no one's going to object.
Sure.
I think my first question was... Actually, no. What I want is for you three to do a Wikipedia entry of yourselves and how everyone outside of listening to the first 99 times 2 episodes would learn about you. What would we find out about you three? And we'll start off with Patrick.
Great. So this is the shortest Wikipedia entry because there's really nothing to talk about. My background with basically everything we talk about is this podcast. I had a brief stint before this podcast where I did a show called The Sausage Factory where I talked about how sausage was made.
Nice.
I left that to start with M of One, and then, but like literally, like
that job was way too intimidating.
Yeah, I
just to look at that
I
amount
just
of
went home
sausage
depressed
all
every
day
day.
long.
No, but like I had never bought a blind box before, or like a toy. I'd never owned a poster before. I didn't have like a group of creatives I spent time with. I had no connection to the world. And then starting this show, this has been my introduction to everything. So, like, my Wikipedia entry is the last 3 years of doing this.
Would you say that prior to the show, it was just you, a growler, and a box of Marlboros, and that was it?
Yeah.
Right?
That's not how I describe it at all. But I've always been like a loner. Like, I never played multiplayer video games. It was just like me by myself.
Well, that's not true. You played WoW.
I never.
That's a
only
massive
PvE,
multiplayer game.
Only PvE, Luke. Never PvP.
I'm just saying, it's still a multiplayer game.
So anyway, so I don't know. Now as far as my trade, I'm a developer. That's what I do, and so that's what my contribution tends to mostly be. And then I love watching films. It's a point of escape that I get to talk about with people. But yeah, that's about it.
Great. And Luke?
Yeah, so, man, I don't know. I've done everything. Like, literally, I've done almost everything that a person can do. I grew up, my family's in construction, so I know all about framing houses and stuff like that. I got into video, like, early on, making, like, home movies of, like, my toys, like, doing stop-motion animation of toys, like, with a friend of mine. We did that, and so that's how I got to love being using a camera and using a video camera. From there, I decided to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but you're supposed to go to college, so I went. I got a semester in and realized I don't know what I want to do, and I don't want to pay any more money, so I dropped out. Through all that, all kinds of random jobs, selling cell phones, working at clothing stores, a barista, like all kinds of weird stuff. I sold ammunition at gun shows. And then I was getting my hair cut one day, and the girl that was cutting my hair was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing hair?" And I was like, "No."
Yes.
I mean, like as a guy, you've cut another guy's hair at some point, like, I don't know.
Oh, no, not necessarily.
No. Don't assume this.
Anyway,
I'm
it's super
tracking with
easy.
you, Luke.
It's super easy.
As a guy, that means that I've cut another guy's hair at some point?
You've never, like, shaved anybody's head, like, even just with clippers.
No.
Really?
Bro, this is
No.
I did that to everybody in college. Like, I was their hairdresser in college.
Anyway.
Wow, okay.
Anyway.
What college did you go to?
The college for people who don't have money.
There you go. So I'd cut friends' hair in high school or whatever. she asked me, and I was like, no. She's like, well, if you're interested at all, if you go to school for hair, I will make sure you have a job when you get done. So I was like, all right, I have no other options right now. I mean, I'm selling cell phones. That's fine. But what's this career? What career do I want? So I went to school to do hair. So I became a licensed hairstylist, and I did that for a couple of years. Had a family in that period of time and didn't stick with it because I didn't have time to sit at a salon and build a clientele.
Not the family.
Yes, I still stuck with the family. I still have that family. It's grown. It's more of them.
Much like the hair.
Much like the hair.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
How attractive was the woman that asked you if you'd ever thought about going to school to cut hair?
Moderately attractive. Why?
Okay. That's curious.
Patrick is workshopping a theory. I can see it in his face.
Whatever. I was already with Rachel at that point.
Okay.
Rachel.
Okay.
It was Rachel's hairdresser, and then so I moved. Okay. So here's the other thing. I moved to Canton, like 50 miles from where I grew up, to go to college. But when I dropped out, all of my friends from high school were out of the city. So I decided to stay in the other city instead of move back home.
I see.
Met Rachel, doing life in Canton, got a licensed cosmetologist, didn't stick with it, started doing video work, other random stuff because I knew about construction. I was doing maintenance for a nursing home. Throughout all of that, I've been doing my own personal creative stuff, whether it's video or photography, or I got into making toys and painting figures and stuff like that. This is really long. I don't know why this is so long.
Yeah.
This is great.
Through that,
he reads it. He's doing like all the articles for Wikipedia too. Like where you like click and like,
these are
expound
the
on each thing.
hyperlinks.
Early life.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going just through somebody else's Wikipedia, and I need to hit the early life, and yeah. So I was doing video freelance. An opening came at my church, and I took the video position, and that's where I met Andrew and Patrick. And the rest is kind of history. I think we've already established that from there. Right now, I do video and photography. I own a company with a partner. We do freelance advertising and product photography and corporate video stuff.
Amateur sausage making.
And sausage making, yeah. But that's pretty much it. So, yeah. Andrew?
Great. Yeah.
All right. Is it me?
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So mine, I grew up much like everyone else as a small child. Everybody cut each other's hair, obviously.
Yes.
We need to clarify. How old were you two when you cut your peers' hair? Was it strictly in college?
No, I was in high school.
I was in college.
I mean...
Okay.
I was in college.
Okay.
My dad was a beautician, and so I think maybe for people who
By
have people in
proxy.
their lives who do that, it makes more
Yeah.
sense.
You're joking.
Nobody in my family was a beautician. Well, my aunt was.
Your dad
but-
was a beautician.
My dad was a beautician, so he was so beautician-y that he used to do the president's wives' hair when they would come into town for rallies and things.
Wow.
We have
Whoa,
letters
really?
handwritten to my dad from President Reagan and from George Bush Sr., I think.
Your dad did Nancy Reagan's hair?
Correct.
And you
Oh
don't
my
even
gosh.
have hair.
I know, it's weird, right? I think he
Patrick.
gave it all to them.
Unnecessary, Patrick.
All right, so anyway, I grew up in second grade. I got connected with my second grade teacher said to my parents, I've been drawing forever, right? And my second grade teacher said to my parents, you know, Andrew's talented, right? And they said, well, yeah. They said, well, you should probably get him connected with somebody to help really kind of hone that talent. And they said, okay. So I got connected with a guy named Clay Verge. We just called him Verge. But he was my private art tutor from second grade all the way till I was a junior in high school.
Wow.
And I met with him an hour and a half every single week after school. Usually it was on Tuesdays. We shifted a couple times to maybe Wednesdays, but it was mostly Tuesdays after school for an hour and a half. And he taught me everything from like shade drawing realism to painting, to airbrushing, to sculpting, to pottery throwing. Like I got essentially over the course of my young adolescence, I got a fine arts degree. over that course of those years. So my goal was to be a Disney animator. That's what I wanted to do ever since I grew up. I grew up in Florida, so Disney was an hour and a half away. That's where we vacationed. We would go 4 times a year to all the parks. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so we even actually, I got an opportunity to work with Disney animators at the Disney Institute, which is no longer the same thing it used to be. But before, the Disney Institute was this thing where you could go and train with people who actually did what you did. So I sat alongside some people who worked on 101 Dalmatians and Beauty and the Beast and some of these animators, and I got to do my own little 15-second animated short, which was terrible. But my mom still has all of the animation paper for it. So that was what I was going to do, and then decided to go to Bible college because that's what you do.
Next step.
And went to Bible college, became a youth pastor for a few years. And then kind of graduated out of that into some other stuff. But the whole time, when I got to college, I got my first computer and my first copy of the student edition of Adobe Illustrator. Great. And started applying everything that I knew about composition and color and layout and stuff that I knew from all my other training to the computer. And the learning curve for Illustrator is pretty deep, especially if you don't know anything about it. So I started doing graphic design, and I've been doing that kind of ever since. And I've done a little bit of everything. I've done apparel design. The coolest thing for me was being able to do an apparel design for The Gap that ended up getting picked up by several TV shows. Most notably, it was in Times Square for the promo of the new Teen Wolf, MTV's Teen Wolf, when that was coming back on. The main character was wearing it on that. And then it's a regular part of Leonard's regular wardrobe on Big Bang Theory, even now. Even in the last season, he wore it once. So that was pretty fun. But I've kind of done a little bit of everything. And so when the show came around and we were talking about what we should divvy things out, the mastery of art and design seemed to make the most sense for me.
And that actually segues perfectly into something I wanted to ask, which was, what was that conversation? How did you decide on the format of the podcast? How did you, even before deciding who was the master, how did you decide that you would even approach it this way, this conversation with the perspective of art and design, TV and film, toys and games?
Yeah.
Patrick?
Does anybody remember?
I kind of remember a little bit.
I remember very vividly because I think I just told this to somebody in another interview.
Oh. Then one of y'all should take it because I'm going to be honest, I don't know that I remember.
Oh, go ahead, Andrew. That's fine.
Okay, so when we were we sat around the table, we talked about the stuff that we like, which is games and art and design and movies and stuff. And that was where we essentially got the idea for the show when a bunch of the people around the lunch table told us that they loved to listen to us talk. They always learned something new. They always walked away entertained, and it was fun. And so we decided to, the decision to do a podcast is a different story, but when we decided to do a podcast, we knew that we needed to talk about something that we already knew about.
Right.
And we knew that there's 1,001 other pop culture podcasts out there. So we decided, what's going to make this different? What's going to make this more unique? And so we decided to, the conversation centered around, we all are jacks of all of these different trades. We're all appreciators, at least. Patrick wasn't the biggest into toys or art, but he was an appreciator of it. He could see it and could be involved in those conversations. So the conversation found its way to talking about being a jack of all trades, but really master of one. And that's where the name came from, and that's where we decided that we were going to call ourselves masters, and we were going to focus on these different things. And then the format was that's fun, that's cool, that's a little bit of a unique twist, but that's still not enough to make us separate maybe from some of the other shows that have that same niche conversation. So we said, how do we do that? How do we make it more unique? And we said, well, we can switch it up. And the way to switch it up is to randomly draw these tokens. And each from week to week, we're going to talk about these topics, but it's not always going to be the master talking about that topic, which will force the other two people to stay on their toes and be learning new things, about these other topics, so it keeps us all fresh and all in that same game. And that was a format we hadn't seen done, and it seemed to be one that has suited us well at this point. It's morphed a little bit since then, but that's kind of the origin of it.
Yeah, and I would say that I think, and we still had to decide to even really fully embrace it, but I think we had a sense that we should just dive in and own it. If we were timid about the idea of calling ourselves masters, or timid about the idea of whatever the hook is or the terminology we used or whatever, then people listening would also maybe not take it seriously or kind of be timid about it as well. Yeah. So I think we just decided to own all the names, own the whatever, and then because of that, I think it really stuck pretty quickly. Yeah. And so now it just feels really natural. Well, like I can't imagine going a different direction.
Yeah, it was because of the distinction of in our spheres of influence. Because it was real easy then to say, oh yeah, because of everybody that we talk to, I know most about toys and games. I'm the master of it. And when we made that distinction of our spheres of influence, it made any of that timidity go away.
You can't fight me on anything,
right? And we made that distinction really early, even in the design process as we were putting this whole thing together. Was we don't want to come across as knowing everything about anything, because we don't. So it was. Let's clarify, even to the general public, when we're saying we're the masters, it just means that of the three of us, we are the master in that area. Exactly.
Right.
We set a very low bar.
Yeah.
So you guys have been doing this now for quite a while, and things have sort of settled into a routine, and then you mix it up by adding video recently, which wasn't difficult enough. So you said, let's make this more complex. But has there been things in the past, since you guys started this so long ago, that you have dropped or that have been like unsuccessful, and you're like, let's just get rid of this thing and not do this anymore?
I mean, I can think of a really simple one just in the transition to video. So I used to take, and it started out being a lot more.
Methamphetamines.
Go ahead. What?
Methamphetamines.
Yeah. No, I used to take a lot more time, and it as we got doing more podcasts, I took less time, but now we ultimately dropped it. Is I used to put a custom like music at the end that would tie into something we talked about in the episodes, whether it was something in the around the table or a guest or something randomly that was talked about. I would put a song to kind of back up that idea. Now that we switched to video with licensing, you just can't do that anymore. So that's why we dropped it. And it just was an extra 10 minutes to edit in, which in the scope of things was just not efficient. And so that was one thing that, we dropped because of basically licensing and time management.
I mean, I would say there's lost and added. We've dropped or changed a lot of format things. I mean, and I think some of that stuff we've still held too tight. I mean, we saw initially we were trying to fit all this into an episode, what we do in a week, and we were having these like hour and a half long episodes,
almost 2 hours.
And everything's
the more comfortable we got with it, it started to expand.
Right.
Oh yeah, exactly. And but then it was tough for us to change initially because you have this feeling of like, well, people are accustomed to it, and you don't want to, you don't want to change the launch day, and you don't want to change the format, and you don't want to do this. But the reality is that what we felt like was something people liked could also be something that was an inhibitor for a lot of other people. And so we were, it was still a tough conversation, but we were able to make a change. And so we've had a couple format shifts. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see another one happen in the not too distant future. I mean, not as drastic as some of what we've done in the past, but it's just the idea of, I think we've learned in some ways to hold things more loosely or be a bit more fluid. Now, the flip side of that is, over time, I would also say there are things that become much more rigid. So I think the way we approach dealing with guests, what our preparation looks like, the direction we know we're going to take the conversation, I would say over time, the amount, I don't want to say predefined as though it prevents any room to wander, but it does become a lot more like we have a instead of knowing only 30 seconds of what the next 30 minutes is going to look like, we now know 15 minutes of what the next 30 minutes is going to look like. That type of thing.
That's roughly half.
Yeah.
We know. We've been doing this for 3 years. This is our 100th air quotes episode.
Well, it's
we've really almost done
episodes since the new format. Yeah,
right. But I think we've almost done like 260 full episodes.
Yep.
Really. So, and that makes sense if you've been following the show for any period of time.
And if you have been following the show since that long, like, thanks, Micah.
Hopefully you know that there's been some changes. But I forgot where I was going with that.
Nice.
You're welcome.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
The one thing I did want to ask was, what is and this is being the only of 5 who doesn't regularly podcast, what is that time frame from when you first have an idea for let's introduce more tokens or let's take something out to when it's implemented? And how does that schedule look like 2 years ago from now to now?
Yeah, anywhere from 5 minutes to 5 weeks. I mean, like, there are things that we have decided to do 5 minutes before we're going to hit record. Like, I think the first week we decided to split up our the episodes on YouTube so that we were separating master categories and around the table. That stemmed out of a conversation, and then we just before record started, so we did it that night.
Yeah.
And but other things like the actually moving to video was about a year of time that it took from the time we announced our intention to move to a video to actually getting the money to do it, figuring out the equipment, figuring out the process, putting all that in place. I mean, that was probably a year that took. So that's kind of each side of the spectrum.
And I think it was mostly just a year because that's not what we do full time. So most of everything that we implement into the show that's a new thing, whether it's a new format or adding the tokens for the hot seats or splitting up into 2 different things, like whatever we do, we all we're lucky that we all can execute different aspects of the show, whether it's web implementation and Andrew has design, I have the audio side of it. Like, we can kind of make everything happen very quickly because we're not dependent on anybody else. And when we all have the personality, when we focus on doing something, we'll just start and get it done. So most of our things happen actually very quickly. It's a couple conversations, and then it's usually, all right, let's just do it and try. Because
it's a couple of conversations, 1 to 2 arguments, 1 more conversation, and then implementation.
And then go.
Yeah.
So then how do you tell if a new element or a part of the show is working? Is it based on feedback that you get from those rascals on the Slack channel?
Yeah.
Is it just how it feels to you guys? Or
I think it's a combination of both. I think a lot. Before Slack, it was a lot of feedback because most of our listeners were friends and family, so it was just, hey, is this working? I mean, the reason we switched to two episodes instead of 1 was people were just stopping listening because they didn't have time to listen through a whole thing.
Or they'd listen to half of it on their way in and then have to listen to the other half later in the week.
Right. And so we were like, okay, well, we can cut that out. We can split that. And now with Slack, we have channels that are the M of 1 Real Talk channel of just give us honest feedback about the show. And there's a lot of people that will give us some really great feedback of just, hey.
We've had some pretty brutal feedback.
And that's what we wanted. We asked for it. Just give it to us straight. And so I think we talked a little bit about this, Jerrod, in the interview with me and you and Mark of we all come from the environment where it's really easy to shift gears and be okay with harsh feedback on projects, and just if it's the best for the project, we can turn and change gears. So we don't hold things very close as far as we don't get our feelings hurt on feedback. And I think we just approach the show that same way of like, hey, is this really working? We want it to be the best it can be, and if it's not that, let's change it. So. Yeah,
I mean, the only thing I'll add to that is there are some things that we continue to do not because we think it's having any effect, but because we just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we're not making money off this, so we need to make sure it stays enjoyable.
Right.
It's okay for it to not be enjoyable once we start making money. Like,
Yeah.
As soon as then I just don't care. Then
there's
it
a
can be a
point of
job.
it where you're like, oh, if it's work, okay, then it's work. I can get on board with that because I'm going to get a check for it.
Right.
But if I'm not going to get a check for it, I better have a good time doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to the like feedback and to changes and doing things that you want versus kind of expectations, was there anything that you thought, oh, the like audience is really going to respond to well, or maybe you thought something was going to be a glaring issue that turned out not to be, like just really didn't get the response, either positive or negative, that you were expecting?
Splitting the format.
Okay.
Is probably the one that people are fine with. Again, that's something we worried about because we thought, oh, people are used to this and they're not going to want to, now we're going to change what they're used to and there's going to be some big revolt and they're never going to listen again. And I don't think anybody cared. I think it was fine.
Changing the release date. We made that
the
decision
release
pretty
date.
quickly. I mean, like,
yeah, that's
so
a good
for
one.
a long time we were a Sunday release initially, and then we changed it to a Tuesday release and a Friday release, so Tuesday and Friday. And then not too long ago, after one conversation that we had with Mark Bricky, where he was like, have you guys done like the study on that? Is there a reason why you have that date? And we were like, no. And he said, well, I've done some research and blah, 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 blah. And so we talked through all that. And then I think it was like the next week, we're like, let's just start releasing on Thursdays now. And we sent out an Instagram post that said, hey, our schedule has changed.
Right.
So we are able to implement things really quickly and stuff that we thought that was going to be a big deal. I think we've learned that stuff isn't going to be as big of a deal as we thought that it
Let me say this too. Consistency is important. I mean, I've said that. We've all talked about it. If you're going to...
He says that consistently.
Yeah, if you're going to start something, you need to be consistent for a bit because you're not going to have anything to measure. A lot of times we start and we give up too quickly and we don't have something to measure. And so we don't have time to get the results we want because we don't invest enough time into it, kind of honing it in. Now, that being said, I will say, at least with the podcast, I have got more of a sense that if the content is compelling, people will find it. So, like, if you release on Monday and you change to Tuesday, the people that were listening on Monday, well, they'll come back on Tuesday. If the content is compelling, people will search it out. So certainly don't go out of your way to make it inconvenient. I mean, recognize if people primarily listen to it on their way to work, if you're listening on the weekend, they're not driving to work, you've now made it more inconvenient on your drop day. But I think as long as you're in that especially that Monday, Tuesday when it is the big listening time, people will find it. So if you have to move the time slightly or move the day to one or the other or whatever, I just wouldn't sweat it.
There's one thing that I noticed that I thought there would maybe be more response, and we just categorically haven't had as much response as I thought, is when we do a giveaway, the engagement on that. And, that's just a really honest peek behind the curtain. Like, we get, 20 entries to any random giveaway that we do, which that just... It is surprising. So
considering the stuff that we give away too, like we have legit artists provide legit. Well, Jerrod, you're one of them.
Yeah.
Andrew, have you done one too?
I guess you gave one of the extra books that you got of mine. Yeah.
So like we have legit work that is being gifted to us and by extension the listeners. And it would seem like the number of downloads that we have compared to the number of people who are engaging in our community compared to the number of people who actually participate in these giveaways, I don't know if it's an insecurity thing.
Sure.
I don't know if it's a time thing.
It's the reason we don't do them very often anymore. We used to do them a lot more.
Well, and we even shifted.
It's not because the stuff is not worth it. It's just like people aren't, Well,
we shifted. Know why. So our first couple contests were asking people to create things because we thought, hey, a lot of our listeners are creative people. Let's have them use their medium and do something for this contest. And then we thought we didn't get as much engagement as we thought we would. So, all right, let's just change it to a very generic, like on Instagram or like on Twitter or whatever, repost or whatever.
A share, yeah.
A share. Still, very low entry point and still low engagement. And it's, I mean, it's fine. Somebody still got it, which is what we wanted. It doesn't matter. Right. But it was surprising based on what our normal engagement is that a giveaway is lower.
I bet you're going to see a spike now.
I hope so.
Like me, I would have assumed that it was high enough, or admittedly, if I'm not engaging, it's because I assume the odds of me getting it are 1 in 5,000.
Right.
So it's just not worth it. But now knowing it is a fraction of that, and everyone else is now realizing that, I've got like a 1 in 25 shot to do this. I mean, it's not going to be like that anymore. But,
I do kind of feel like we have to do a giveaway on this episode, though.
There you go.
All right, let's do it.
Figure something out.
Yeah, let's do it. So I have this. We've seen this already. I got this for Andrew for his birthday. And since we are so good of friends and I know him, he decided to get it also. So
very nice.
I got the Justin Peterson Shredder, his villains set for Andrew for his birthday. And then Andrew decided that he would also get it because, of course, it was a timed release. And it was very limited quantities when he was doing his villain series, so you had to jump on it.
I'm an adult and I have my own money, so I buy stuff when I want it.
Totally fine.
To piss people off who buy me gifts.
It's fine. It was just it was frustrating for me. I was like, this is a good gift, and he got it. Cool.
And I said, I agree. That's why I bought it for myself.
Yeah. Anyway,
so being the problem solver that you are,
well, I'm going to give it away because I mean, let's be honest. Turtles is not my thing. We know that Ghostbusters is my thing.
Right.
That's right.
There's something coming that I'm very excited about.
Turtles.
So let's do. How do we want to do this giveaway, Andrew? Do we want to do it?
Let Kolb do it.
Yeah. Well, I meant Andrew Kolb.
Oh, you could see why that was confusing.
I do see why that was confusing. Andrew Kolb, what should this giveaway be?
I like discussion. I think either comment on the Instagram post or on the YouTube video.
Okay.
And we'll pick from one of those two.
Perfect.
So really, you could do it twice and have twice the chance.
Yeah.
So get out there.
Yeah.
Leave a comment. I will leave the details of when the winner will be chosen to the true hosts.
Yeah.
But until then, comment on Instagram or YouTube.
Sweet. And
we'll
you'll be getting both. You'll be getting the color and the black and white. So
great.
Yep.
Was that really just off the cuff? That was rather amazing for putting that together right here before my eyes. Good for you guys.
Hey, when you're
we've been doing this for 3
260 into
years.
this, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
I know, but even Kolb just jumped right on. That's amazing.
Because he's a pro.
He is.
I don't know podcasting, but I do know content.
There you go.
There you go. Jerrod, if you have anything else, otherwise, we want to be respectful of your time, and maybe we'll get into kind of final questions.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I had so many questions for you guys. All right. So I'll ask this because I told you guys this before the show, so I want to make sure I get this in here. I'd like each of you to share a favorite memory from the show at any point. And it can be either an entire episode, it could be a specific guest that you had, or even just like a moment in the conversation that you remember.
I would like to go first, so Andrew and Luke don't steal mine.
Dang it.
I already know what yours is.
I already know what. I bet this is Andrew's, so I apologize. When Aaron Draplin played guitar on the podcast, would have to be a favorite moment. It was very surreal, but we were talking to him. It was a very long conversation. I want to say we talked probably 2.5 hours, something like that. And when we set these interviews, we always tell the guest we're only going to take max 45 minutes of your time. We try to keep the interview to around 30. If you look at times, you'll see we're pretty consistent. 25 minutes, we're asking final questions, doing our wrap up. But then we have a couple things we do after we get the guest to give a drop and some stuff. So we tell the guest 45 minutes. So 2.5 hours is what we ended up spending talking to Draplin. And that was not because we were like refusing to let him go, but it became this really natural, fun, flowing conversation. And at one point, he turned around, he grabbed the guitar behind him and picked it up, and he just started playing guitar. And it was just surreal. We're talking to this it's this larger than life figure, this guy that's considered like a giant in his industry, and we're watching him do something that he even said himself. I don't even know that many people know that I play guitar, and he's like playing for us. He's giving his time freely when, he could be out hustling and making money and doing whatever. And it was just a really special moment. That moment meant a lot to me.
I think anyone who's heard him talk, though, it wouldn't be surprised that episode went as long as it did.
No,
it's true.
Yeah.
That episode is the only interview we've ever had where I teared up. I think I don't know if I said it on air, but afterwards I
don't know if you did.
I definitely, like, it was really moving. The conversation was really moving, and we're gonna have him on again soon to kind of bring him back into the fold after the new year. But that first one was, man, it was special.
Is that yours, Andrew? Or are you going to just echo that, or you have one?
No, I'm going to actually echo what I said in the episode that we had with Jerrod and Mark. I think there's a lot of them, but I think one that sticks out to me in this conversation, like as we were talking, actually, I realized we've had 3 iterations of our faces that we have out there for our avatars and things.
Yeah.
The first 2 came from Kolb, and then the newest set has come from Jerrod, which I think is special. I think it speaks to your guys' level of commitment, not only to the show but to us individually, and it shows a true friendship, actually. But as I was sitting there thinking about that, I was realizing that, yeah, Jerrod has done, characters of us. He's also responsible for doing every Tsum Tsum character that you've seen, and like I've got right behind me Hipster Mickey and Hipster Minnie, and all of these things that are so much a part of what I love, that Disney side of me, and so being able to now be friends with you, Jerrod, I think is probably one of my favorite takeaways from the show. And it's not because it's just you, but I think in general, it's indicative of, it's the relationship that I have with Kolb now, because I loved your work before we ever talked to you. And I had that Ninja Turtle print that's right. Oh, it's behind my mic. But that Ninja Turtle print that you did with Mondo before I ever talked to you. And now Tom Whalen, like some of these people, and Aaron Draplin. It's the relationships with the people that I idolized, and the reality that those are just people that we get to hang out with now still boggles my mind.
Kolb was the first one that I had that moment when I said, like, this person I'm talking to on the internet that is like an amazing artist that I've never met, like, they could become my friend. Like, it was like this weird moment of like, they could enjoy talking to me and we could just talk not at the podcast. Yeah. I don't know. It was just this weird. But you were the first guy that I had that moment with, because you're one of the first 5 people that we even talked to on the show. I think
you were one of our first guests, and I just think I honestly, on this week where we focus on things we're thankful for and the stuff that we're blessed to do, I think the biggest thing is just the relationships with people that prior to this, much less the general population listening to this, kind of deem as unapproachable or untouchable because they are successful and they are iconic, at least in terms of the stuff that they create. I mean, you guys are creating, both of you are creating things that people are sharing with their friends and their family, and that will live in their houses forever, this kind of stuff. And I get to interact with you on a level that is so not that's just on a friend level, and that's honestly one of the best things about doing this.
Oh, that is very sweet.
Luke, yes. I don't know how you're going to follow up to that.
Well, I'm not. I mean, it's not going to be that
Luke's
sappy.
Like, there was
I'm
this
a realist.
episode where Patrick farted real loud.
Like, I'm glad we're friends. You guys are cool. Whatever. No.
Do you remember the bocce ball episode?
Yeah, that was awesome. Yep. I was so good at bocce ball.
That's a good one.
So I think for me, and I've said this a couple times already in different things. There were a few people when we started this that I wanted to talk to from the toy world, and one of those was Joe Ledbetter. And when we got a chance to talk to him, it was pretty early on, and it was very, very intimidating for me because he was the only guy I knew. Like, there was other artists we talked to that I appreciated their work because their work was good, but nobody I never really followed illustrators or designers up until we started the podcast. Like, I followed toy guys, and that's about it. And having him on, it's still probably my favorite time because it was so personal to me. It was so like it was a milestone. It was a time where like I had set a goal of, I want to talk to this person. If I'm going to do this, I want to make it something, and it would be so cool if I could eventually talk to this person. And I did, and we did, and he was completely awesome, totally down to earth, very, very great. Just like every other guest that we've ever had, we've never had a bad guest. We've had a couple bad experiences because of technical issues, but never like a person that was just like,
sorry, Scat One.
What?
Sorry,
Scat One. He was one of the first people that we.
That was a technical issue. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm apologizing to Scat.
Yeah.
It was a technical issue.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
Scat was great.
But there was never.
He's awesome.
We've never had a bad guest. But having Joe on, it was like it was a big moment for me, and it was something that was just really special because it happened. And yeah, so that was mine. I think just having somebody that I looked up to so much be so cool and accommodating. He called us from Italy. He was visiting family.
He was at his like family's home
and
in
he's
Italy.
Like, yeah, I got time. I'll make time. And it was super cool. It was very chill. So.
And if you go back and listen to that episode, you hear
Siren.
hear Italian, sirens and Italian traffic out back. It's funny. It's pretty good.
Well, no, that's great. And I think that's also a testament to the three of you as hosts, like being able to kind of get the best out of anyone despite technical difficulties or being across the world. So I think for my last question, and I don't know, hopefully this won't go too long, but do you have a favorite story for the other or about the other two hosts that maybe is unrelated to the podcast, either time before or something that happened outside of an episode?
Yeah, I have one.
I already know what Andrew's going to tell.
I have my favorite Patrick story is a story.
They're both going to be Patrick's stories. I know exactly what you're going to tell.
I wasn't part of. I was never around for. But the mental image and the idea I have of how this happened is my favorite story that anybody could ever tell. And Patrick, I feel like you should just
tell the story.
The motorcycle story.
Because now it's visual. I think we've shared it before because the first time we heard it was on the show.
Okay, so my family used to own a motorcycle shop, and we sold Kawasaki, Suzuki, and related stuff.
Okay.
And because we own a motorcycle shop, either with demo vehicles or with used inventory, I could just go ride them when I wanted to. That's a nice perk. And so going out to dinner, grabbed a motorcycle. To be clear, it was a Vulcan 1600 Mean Streak, and went and ate hibachi.
Now you have the picture in your head, right, Jerrod? Because you know what a Vulcan Sour Dream Streak is, right?
I wasn't sure at first, but now it's coming crystal clear. And hibachi, too. So
okay,
I'm there.
So I go and eat. All right. And I eat a lot. All right. And it's one of those times where like you get right to the end and like you power through because it's really good. And then you just have this moment where you stop and you have this like, I may have just eaten too much, and you get kind of sweaty and maybe a bit clammy. And I needed air. Like I just needed to go outside. I was just not feeling good in this moment. So I got up, I like left someone my wallet and I went outside and I thought I'll just walk around a few minutes. Things will kind of like shift downwards, and then I'll be fine. And I walked outside, and I was not feeling it. And then I had this moment of like, okay, I just need some cool wind in my face. That's what I'm missing.
No.
So I jumped on the motorcycle and I start down the road.
Safety first,
and
right?
I'm telling
Safety
you,
first.
like, no. So I'm not even. I just pulled out. I don't even think
you get ready.
No, no. You listen.
All right.
I'm telling the story.
Let him tell it.
So I am just pulling out on the road. I think I may have just hit second gear, and all of a sudden it's like here it comes. There's no stopping it, and I just I just start losing. I'm throwing up just over and over. The gear's like it's pinned. I forget to shift, so the bike is just like redlining. It's a 4-lane road. Traffic's passing me on both sides, and the whole time I'm wearing a full face helmet that's like up. It's a size smaller than I wear, so it's up against my chin, and I am just throwing up straight into a full face helmet, and it's just oh my gosh. So I drove straight to the motorcycle shop my parents owned, and I pull off the helmet.
It filling up, by the way. Like in the visor.
Dude, and it's like 8 or 10 times, just like
Flies up and just dumps out.
traffic passing me. I'm just like sitting in second gear, and so I go straight to my parents' motorcycle shop. Take off the helmet. I grab a water hose. I hose myself off, and I just throw the helmet in the garbage can, get in my car, and drive home. Like that's the end of it.
And the bike is still there.
You
to
didn't
this
get
day.
dessert. Ugh.
I had dessert. It came out last. No, it actually came out first.
out
That's
first,
what was
yeah.
interesting. When I got to the lettuce, I was like, ginger salad. We've made it through it.
Oh my gosh.
That's
That
worst
story's just as
question
good.
ever, Kolb.
That's my favorite.
Okay.
That story is
That was
just
the
as
lowest
good
point of
hearing
my
it this time.
life. Just so you know.
The best is telling that story and just picture it, because when you see him in person doing it, he does this thing and he has the handlebars and he's doing this, trying not to tip over the bike, and then he's like, and then he says that because the helmet is pinned on his chin right here.
I was having to use my shoulder to push the helmet up so it would come out.
so that the throw up would drain out of the
So
bottom.
I was
of it.
like doing this with my head. If you're on YouTube, you can see this, trying to like push the helmet up
while
so it would
driving
release.
a motorcycle and not trying to crash. This whole thing just makes me happy every time I think about it.
I never in my life considered what do you do if you throw up. Like in a car,
You pull over.
Sure.
no, but I've never thought about like on a motorcycle. Now I know.
Yeah. Yep.
It's terrible.
Safety first. All right, that was going to be mine too.
Speechless.
So I'm gonna hand it over to Patrick to tell his story.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell the me dancing story.
Oh, that's a good one. No, it's not gonna. That would have been a better precursor to that one. So I'm gonna let it go.
You can't beat that one.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
so Patrick, a story about Luke or Andrew, or both, since both of theirs were for you.
Ugh.
No, wait, mine's actually very positive. When I got married, Luke was my best man. And I didn't invite Andrew to any of my wedding festivities.
That's actually true, and he didn't
didn't.
realize that he didn't until we were all together in California a couple weeks ago.
I don't know why. I guess I assumed you didn't want to be there. Or
yeah, that's probably a good assumption. No, that's a good assumption.
I feel really bad about it. But Andrew officiated my wedding because he said earlier that he's a licensed, like an ordained minister. So on stage is obviously Mackenzie and I, since she married me. But Andrew is the
Hang on a
one.
second. Can we address something? People can't see this because you can't see Jerrod. Jerrod, you genuinely look like you're disgusted that I am an ordained pastor. Look at
It's
his
like
face.
I was looking at
his
Jerrod when he was talking. Or
His
you imagine?
eyebrows are just furrowed beyond what I can even do to exaggerate. You're like, I can't believe that they would give him a license to do anything like that.
I'm still on Patrick's vomit helmet, so I think
worst.
I'm still recovering
Ooh,
from
that's
that.
a good name for a band.
Yes.
Patrick's vomit
Patrick's
helmet.
vomit helmet. So yeah, so on stage is Mackenzie and I, Andrew officiating the wedding, and then Luke as my best man, and they both killed it, and Luke saved me from so much stress, and but yeah, so that is something that I'll always remember, and if this podcast ever breaks up, I will hate the memories of my wedding.
That's honestly the only thread keeping this together.
I mean, that's beautiful. I think that's a perfect spot to end the episode. Where can everyone, I mean, obviously you've gone through this 100 times, but where can everyone find you?
Andrew.
I'm at Andrew Sale with 3s instead of E's on all the different platforms.
And I'm the great Patsby with 2 A's on Instagram exclusively.
And I'm Luke Gall on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
And Jerrod?
Oh, and you can find me at jmaruyama.com on all the socials, actually.
And I'm Kolb is neat pretty much everywhere. So I think that's gonna do it from all of us here. Here's to another, I mean, more than 100 episodes. It's weird to start this off, but bye, friends.
Are you going to do your...
You're next, Jerrod. We're waiting on you.
Waiting on me. I thought he was going to say, I'm Andrew. No?
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought he was going to do.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's right.
Oh, we should be clear. Andrew has never listened to the show before.
Right. His episodes only. Sure.
He always leaves before we get to the end. So
What I'm realizing is I made notes about the start and the middle of the podcast, and then did not make any about the end.
Right.
So,
all right, kick it off, Andrew.
One more time, and that's going to do it, because that's it. I'm Andrew.
I'm Jerrod.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Patrick.
And I'm Luke.
Bye, friends.
See you real soon.
Peace out.
Bye.
Hold on to your butts.
Hey, and as some special bonus content, you can hear more about the podcast if you listen to the Squared Co podcast with Jerrod and Mark. It's just a continuation of the conversation.
Was going to promote that. I mean, if I'm being fully honest, I kind of thought that was coming.
Just cut this in at the end. This is the promotion for it. Squared Co podcast. There's interviews with the three of us where we do a deeper dive into our likes and dislikes about each other.
Yeah, and it's 3 different episodes, 3 different interviews with primarily the same questions. There's a couple of change-ups, but man, it was super fun. I can't wait to listen to what Patrick and Luke had to say.
Yes.
It's mostly positive.
I can't wait to listen to what I had to say either.
Here's why I was hoping you were going to bring it up, Jerrod, because so you interviewed us, right? And you asked some like super deep questions. And and it seemed like the more honest we were with our responses, at least with me, the harder the questions got. Like if I had just kind of phoned in the first one, it would have been like, oh, okay, we're fine, we won't do anything. But because I answered the first one vulnerably and honestly, they got harder and harder as the episode went on. And by the time I was done, like I had to tell Patrick and Luke, like, hey, here's some questions that he asked. So if just be on the lookout for these.
We all did. There were moments that I had to say, hey, Patrick, I said this. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, but most of the time I said the same thing.
Right. Which was great.
Yeah, I think you'll find the same thing across the board. So anyway, go listen
like
to
Luke was like, Patrick, I told them you were a jerk. And then I was like,
That's right.
No, I told them I was a jerk too. So we're on the same page.
That's exactly why we interviewed you separately. We wanted to get some dirt. So thank you guys for doing that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm excited for those to come out.
All right. So I guess we can all stop recording.